talked about this before. The idea that romance has supposedly disappeared from movies. But has it really? I mean, it's definitely still there. I mean, you can look at these examples from major movies released last year. Okay, so it's not gone. This video can be done. We have nothing to discuss. Thank you all for watching. If you want to support this channel, you can check out my Patreon. But wait, has it actually disappeared from TV and movies? Because I'm not the only one who's noticed this. In fact, these days, when I see a romance or a romantic subplot play out in a major release, I subconsciously feel kind of surprised. I mean, romance is there until the writers avoid it like the absolute plague, to the point of making awkward, undefined relationships just to get away from it. And that's a really bad thing, right? I mean, we shouldn't have romance disappear from movies. Hollywood has graced us with such epic, inspirational love affairs in the past, like
I'm haunted by the kiss that you should never have given me. My heart is beating, hoping that kiss will not become a scar.
I'm running with it.
You are in my very soul.
This is gonna be a hard point for me to argue, isn't it? But let's get started. Let me argue about the phenomena I've seen in movies, which is the disappearance of romance. And the reason why, if such a thing was happening, why it would be so noticeable is because, make no mistake, romance is huge in movies. It's huge in stories in general, of course, but it was a particular main staple of the Hollywood movie. It used to be a guarantee that if you were watching a major mainstream movie, you'd get a romantic subplot of some kind. It was a given. And there's a very important reason for why that was, but stay tuned to the video to find out. But the usual use of a romantic plotline was much to some people's dismay, because as we got a romantic plot or subplot in pretty much every movie, some of it was pretty awful, and we were treated to some cringy stuff. Let's look at the highlights, shall we? Let me read to you all the romantic epic tale of Attack of the Clones. In this epic, Anakin Skywalker must impress his true love, Padme Amidala, a woman he met 10 years ago when he was a child and she was 5 years older than him. After giving her some creepy stalker looks,
Sorry, milady.
he will bring forth some of his most attractive qualities in order to properly woo her, like admitting he supports fascism.
Sounds an awful lot like a dictatorship to me.
Well, if it works.
You're making fun of me.
No, I'd be much too frightened to tease a senator.
After riding a potato and rolling with her in the dirt, Anakin will confess to his rampant anger and bloodlust, and to the fact that he murdered children.
And not just the men, but the women. And the children, too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them!
Bang, love. Wedding in 24 hours, Anakin got that riz. Now they can continue to express their undying love for one another through poetic, well-delivered dialogue.
You're so beautiful.
It's only because I'm so in love.
No. No, it's because I'm so in love with you.
But hey, not everything can be the epitome of true romance. But at least Anakin and Padme's relationship was meant to happen and was crucial to the Star Wars lore, even if it was handled badly. But let's look at some examples of people shoving romance into movies where it absolutely does not belong. Keeley is a dwarf with no character development. Tariel is an elf with no character, and no appearances from the book, and has no relevance to the story other than the producers wanted to shoehorn in a female character into the film. Keeley and Tariel love each other after sharing a conversation off screen because the movie said so. They will express their love for one another through awkward stares and speeches about love periodically through the next 2 movies. In the end, Keeley dies. But it's okay.
Because it was real.
Bilbo Baggington will one day tell his nephew of this gripping tale, even though he witnessed none of it. In Avengers Age of Ultron, Black Widow, after spending multiple movies developing relationships with men she had far more chemistry with, will out of nowhere start throwing herself at the man she had the exact opposite relationship with, effectively assassinating them as Joss desperately tries to retcon this turd in. Meanwhile, Star Wars would continue to bless us with wonderful expressions of romantic love through the relationship between Kylo and Rey.
Why did you hate your father?
And at one point, it seemed like they just wanted everyone to hook up.
I'm Poe.
Right.
I know.
And that isn't even getting into the terrible straight-up romance movies like Twilight. I will contend, though, Twilight, from what I've seen of it, looks amazing.
Are you gonna tell me how you stopped the band?
Yeah. I had an adrenaline rush. It's very common.
You can Google it.
And of course, it's grisly porno fanfiction spawned the 50 Shades of Grey series, promoting abuse as love, of course. So yeah, Hollywood has had plenty of examples of bad romance, whether it's badly written romance or just shoehorning it into places where it didn't belong. So it's no wonder that some were crying out for them to please stop shoehorning in the love stories. And for years, I was definitely one of those people. But like I said, I've kind of noticed it disappear in films lately. But that can't be right. We saw it in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse with Miles and Gwen. Elemental was all about a romantic relationship. Top Gun Maverick had the traditional obligatory romance in it. But then I was subconsciously surprised that romance appeared in any of these movies, and I'm not the only one I've heard say that. And I think that sensation comes not from the fact that romance has completely disappeared, but from the fact that there are multiple examples of romance not being there when it should. For example, I think the first time I noticed the disappearance of romance in movies, and it actually bothered me, was all the way back to Kong Skull Island, starring Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson. To give a little context, the 1930s King Kong has always been one of my favorite black and white movies, and I'm a bit of a Kong Godzilla junkie for that reason. But the key to King Kong movies is there was always supposed to be a romance at its core. Heck, the relationship in the first King Kong is what led to Mario and Pauline, which later evolved into the very iconic Mario and Peach, so it's kind of a big deal. So I was a bit amazed to see that the new King Kong movie had a male lead, we had a female lead, lost on an island with Kong, and there was nothing between them. I mean, literally nothing. They get to the epic battle scene, and the emotional resolution is that they just hug as barely acquaintances. And there I am, watching my Kong movie, person who begged for years for Hollywood to pull back on their romances, and internally I'm going, just kiss already! This is a King Kong movie! But there are most definitely other examples I can use to point out this trend. Disney movies have also abandoned romance, which is going to be very noticeable once again because it used to be a main staple of Disney princess movies. But a Disney princess hasn't had a love interest since Anna and Frozen, and that was 11 years ago. Disney princesses are on their own now. Of course, sometimes Disney is forced to give their princesses love interests if it's, say, a remake of an older film where a relationship was at its core. But as I pointed out again and again, Disney seems to be walking on eggshells when they have to do that. If Disney can avoid romance, they will. They did this in Mulan 2020. Shang and Mulan were the romantic relationship in the original animated film, but in the new film, Shang's character was, of course, removed. He was replaced instead by some sort of pipsqueak soldier boy from Mulan to completely brush off. Apparently, Disney was afraid of Mulan having a relationship with a guy who would be a strong superior. Meanwhile, as soon as their Snow White remake started doing a little press, they made sure to make it clear that it would not be true love saving the day.
Not gonna be saved by the prince.
And as I already covered in a video, at one point Wish was supposed to allegedly feature not one, but two new Disney couples, a villain couple, and at one point it would seem a relationship between Asha and the star, who would be able to take on human form. Some of the remnants of that might have been revealed in the original version of At All Costs, which was meant to be a romantic duet before it was changed. Now you might be asking, is allowing us to have Disney female protagonists with no romantic entanglements inherently a bad thing? Absolutely not. People are different in real life and look for different things at different times of their life. So of course it's not bad to diversify the kinds of characters that you present and what their motives are. Not every character is going to want or work well with a love interest. Not every story works with a romantic subplot. I think Elsa and Mirabel worked well without love interests. But that also doesn't mean that having romance itself is inherently bad. I loved Mulan and Shang's relationship in the original Mulan. Mulan starts off as an awkward character who thinks out of the box, though that isn't appreciated by others. Shang is the experienced warrior who, behind his toughened exterior, is eager to please his family just like Mulan is. Shang's toughness and maturity helps push Mulan into the warrior she becomes, but Mulan's impulsiveness and out-of-the-box thinking means she makes crucial choices Shang wouldn't have thought of, saving him and changing his outlook as he comes to appreciate all of who Mulan is.
You are the craziest man I've ever met, and for that I owe you my life. From now on, you have my trust.
The relationship benefits the characters as it does the story. When they removed that for the remake, they just made the story less. Likewise, I thought the romantic relationship in the original development of Wish sounded a lot more interesting than what we actually got in the movie. The first evil power couple on screen, sign me up. And I don't know, my mind just started running with inspiration of what that relationship between Asha and the Star Boy would have been. Aspiring sorcerer's apprentice and magical wish-granting star could have been a way to drum up some real heart and investment in the characters through this relationship and adventure that they are having in the film, as opposed to what we got in the movie, which the general consensus on Wish wish is that it's a pretty boring and soulless film. Romance added to the story of Mulan, but they removed it out of fear. Disney had a great story in the pipeline with Wish, but they avoided it. And both those films ended up crashing anyway. But we still have other examples of romance being removed from media. Probably the worst example I've ever seen of this avoidance of romance happened in the Star Wars Disney Plus show Ahsoka, with the characters of Ezra and Sabine. For those who don't know, Ezra and Sabine are two characters who had previously appeared on the show Rebels, and they were shown to have some kind of romantic connection. In Ahsoka, Sabine is on a personal mission to find and save Ezra. She disobeys orders to do so. She inadvertently releases an evil enemy and endangers thousands of lives, all to get to Ezra. This relationship is that important to her, and remember, they were already established to have a romantic connection in the past. But with all this, what does the adaptation of Ahsoka have to say about the true nature of their relationship?
We're not really family, but you're like a sister to me.
Really? And when they finally get their big reunion that Sabine had risked everything for, they kind of talk a little bit and hug. When you see something like this, where the canonical romantic relationship between two characters was removed and they sort of just tiptoe over it with this new sisterly, brotherly, deeply incredible emotional connection that is anything but a romance, you've got to know something is up. But for those asking, this is not a trend exclusive to Disney projects. Remember Barbie and Ken, the very iconic toy couple, but when they appeared in their first feature film together, of course they could not be a couple.
Ken's just a really good friend.
Because that's the subversive thing now. The major female lead does not have any kind of romantic interest. I was at first against this because I wanted to see the iconic couple together, but I'm all about story and what works for the story, so for a bit of time I defended the change. It was doing something with the idea of Barbie not being interested in Ken. However, my mind gradually changed back. One of the things that changed it was seeing Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling in interviews. They have a ton of chemistry together, and clearly they know that. That's why they greenlit a new film after the fact where they would allegedly be a romantic couple in that film. So it's a major question mark on whether that film is even going to be made. But you've got to wonder, what did we miss by not actually being able to see Margot and Ryan be the dynamic duo in the billion-dollar film adapting an iconic toy couple? Was it worth losing that just to do the subversive thing where, ha! The iconic couple isn't a couple anymore. The problem with that is this subversion isn't a subversion anymore. It's happening all the time now. I don't know if Greta Gerwig knows this though. I thought it was interesting that in Gerwig's version of The Little Women, it was also a movie struggling with the idea of romance as we see Jo fighting against the idea that women are only made for romantic relationships. It should be noted that, to my knowledge, the book version of Little Women doesn't really focus on this. In interviews, however, Gerwig stated that she thought the movie's themes about women not being meant only for romance was very relevant today.
Then I read it again and I couldn't believe how modern and strange and urgent it was.
And I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it.
I find that statement to be odd, however. I don't think anyone today is saying that women are only meant for romance and marriage. I mean, there's fringe people, of course. But for the most part in the Western world, we live with more freedom than ever, with an emphasis on making your own choices in life. No one's saying that women have to get married or else. It seems to be something that Greta herself is a little hung up on, however. It was a major theme in her Little Women adaptation, Barbie, and she's also the one who was tasked to write the true loveless Snow White remake. But I don't think that any of this is nearly as relevant or groundbreaking as she and other writers seem to think.
How I would describe their relationship is that of fierce devotion, love, that goes beyond any form of relationship substance because it's boring. We've all seen that.
It's true, Rebecca. We have seen the romantic trope a million times, and I'm fine with the way the Mission Impossible characters are. But let's stop acting like breaking away from the romantic trope is something new. It's happening a lot now, it seems. Though everyone seems to think that they are doing something new, every time they avoid romance or present us with a new pseudo-sisterly, brotherly love, friendly, totally close but never absolutely in 1,000 years romantic relationship.
And they just make the most perfect, incomplete couple.
So yes, there is a clear trend of romance being avoided in movies these days. If they made a Mickey Mouse movie, then he would be his best friend, totally not girlfriend, who he loves like a sister. But even beyond the obvious examples of romance disappearing where it usually is, the disappearance might be noticeable even on a subconscious level as more and more pieces of media merely avoid having a romantic plot or subplot from the get-go, or just place far less emphasis on it. That's why I'm shocked whenever we see a romantic plotline in a movie, because it's a major gamble these days if we'll even get one or not. So now that we've established that it is a trend, we might want to explore exactly why it's a trend. Is it merely a response to how many bad, overdone, forced romances there were in media? Well, actually, I don't think so. And I have a big reason for why it's happening, but before we get into that big reason, let's look at some of the smaller reasons feeding into it. When it comes to Disney, they may be partially affected by the amount of Karens that have been swirling around their films, demanding everything give the correct portrayal of how things should be. Disney came under fire for portraying the fairy tale idea of true love at first sight, marriage in a day. So starting with Frozen, instead of being about true love, it explored the absurdity of the trope of marrying someone you just met. Instead, Frozen sought out to explore what love really means and what different kinds of love are, especially sisterly love in this case. And not a year later, Disney explored the exact same theme in their Maleficent movie, with a very similar twist at the end where true love was a scene between a surrogate mother and daughter versus a romantic relationship. This was very clearly a response to the criticisms against classic Disney fairy tale romance, depicting true love in a day very unrealistically. And you can't have unrealistic things happen in a fairy tale! We live in a society that is desperately trying to sanitize things and make everything right and make sure everything is teaching the correct lessons. The thing is, I think a movie like Frozen is very good in its exploration of what different kinds of love are. But does Frozen's well-done exploration of sisterly love invalidate Tangled's romantic relationship? In my opinion, Rapunzel and Flynn have one of the most well-done chemistries and relationships in all of Disney animation. Both stories have value. One doesn't invalidate the other. And Frozen wasn't against the idea of romantic love either. It would only be after that we saw it completely disappear from their princess films. And I have a big reason, once again, for why that most likely was, and an even bigger reason for why Frozen and Maleficent chose to focus on something other than romantic love. But stay tuned for that once again. Another part of the trend seems to be linked with the new standard of portraying female characters. As you'll notice, a lot of these pieces of media that are avoiding romance wholesale are ones starring female characters. Except Rey, I don't know what was going on there. Because there's a way of thinking these days that a female character will lose her agency if she's given a love interest, or worse, is primary motivated by love. I do not think a film like Titanic could get made today because you've got a romantic relationship prominently, that's what the story is all about, and you've got a woman who is primarily influenced and set free by a man. I'd say this is happening as a correction of the past where female characters were oftentimes regulated to the role of love interest, but I think it goes deeper than that. Remember what we talked about with that Greta Gerwig interview and how she used multiple films to rebuke the idea that women are only meant for love? This is a fear that I know some women have. It comes as a reaction to the past where there were cultures and parts of cultures insisting that all a woman was good for was to please a man and be in a romantic relationship to that end. However, while I've already discussed why I don't think that fear is really warranted in the modern day, I also think it's kind of backwards thinking to think that if a woman is motivated by wanting to find love, then that makes her less independent. How does it take away from a woman's agency if pursuing love is her choice? And what's really wrong about the goal of wanting to find a relationship where two people mutually care about each other and support each other, even if the search for that may be difficult? And when it comes to characters, no one is an island. Most characters are made great in part by one's supporting cast and the way that those characters' similarities and differences can bring about development, heart, or even just entertaining chemistry. That absolutely can come in the form of a romantic relationship, and it has in the past. Patty Jenkins was actually a big proponent that female leads should be allowed to have love interests too, and she demonstrated that with Diana and Steve Trevor. And then she completely went off the rails with them in Wonder Woman 1984, where Wonder Woman hooks up with Steve Trevor while he possesses a stranger's body. Hollywood, 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 you do not make this easy for me. It's like they have two extremes 90% of the time. With that last part, though, is that once again the real reason why Hollywood's been pulling back on romance? The primary reason, the one that I was talking about from the beginning. That romance has just been done so badly, so many times that people don't want it anymore. I don't believe that it has anything to do with that at all, actually. I talk about bad writing on here all the time and how I think it's to blame for a lot that's gone wrong in entertainment. However, decisions aren't always made because of bad writing or just mere incompetence. I think there's a much deeper reason for why romance has become avoided in media, and I don't think it entirely has to do with the modern ideal of an independent woman and what she should want either. I think at the root of it, there are some people who feel uncomfortable with romance. We can see several examples of this. Not too long ago, the result results of a census on Gen Z's feelings on sex and romance in movies and TV went viral, as most said they wanted less of that and preferred stories focused on platonic relationships instead. Now, I've got a lot of empathy for my generation, which I technically qualify into. I too am tired of turning on shows and never knowing if I'm going to be treated to some sort of random pointless sex scene or the writer's fetish, because it's like people don't know how to do a relationship otherwise. It should be noticed though that random pointless sex scenes and romance in films are not the same thing, and I'm wondering if that poll was merely worded wrong and the two things were conflated. However, an article on the Washington Post explored this topic further. According to the writer, asking the Gen Zers they knew, they were frustrated with the romantic aspects of their life. They were broken by them and wanted to focus on any other kind of non-romantic relationship instead. I think this is the real reason why we've been seeing a pullback on romantic relationships in media. It's especially why we've been getting these weird instances of pseudo-non-romantic brotherly sisterly friendships where romance should be. We've supposedly got a new generation that's confused and made uncomfortable by that type of relationship. Or so we're meant to think. Certain companies are sanitizing their storylines accordingly, thinking that it's what people want. Or it could be that the young people behind the scenes writing these stories aren't comfortable with romance, so they'll do anything they can to remove it. Now, where do I stand with this whole romance in movies thing? What do I think? After all the bad relationships there have been and still are in movies and TV, perhaps I should feel glad that the American film industry has been rolling back on it. And if that's what people actually want, then who am I to disagree? However, I'm taking the opposite stance. I'm obviously against the idea that you should have a romance in every movie, because not every story requires it, and you're just gonna create a bad romance if you force it. But that doesn't mean you should avoid romance if your story would actually benefit from it either, because now we come to the real reason why romance was used so much in movies and TV. It worked. Most people in real life crave a romantic relationship. The idea of finding someone who mutually cares for them on a far deeper level than usual. And even if that kind of relationship isn't what a person wants for themselves, that still doesn't mean it isn't what they want to see in the real world. Because even if we don't all want a romantic relationship for our personal life, we all still want to see our parents work things out and stay together. That's why romance was used so much in movies. It's a human thing. And because it's what most people want to see on some level or another in real life, putting it into movies was an easy way to get the audience to connect with the story. The greatest filmmakers throughout the history of film have understood this. It dates back to the very first film that ever won an Oscar. Let's look at how that film, Wings, used its romantic subplot to enhance its story. In the movie, the protagonist, Jack, is a young person who has always dreamed of flying. At home, he has two romantic rivals. The girl next door, who always has supported him and has always been in love with him, despite him never showing her much appreciation. His actual interest in Sylvia, the rich girl in town who serves as his fantasy girl, even though she is actually interested in David, who Jack antagonizes as a rival. But then Jack's wish to fly is granted when World War I occurs and he and David are inducted into the Air Force. While there, the two men resolve their rivalry and actually become best friends. Though Jack is still convinced that Sylvia loves him, even though behind the scenes she's made it clear she actually loves David. The two men, now friends, desperately try to protect each other's feelings on the matter, however, with David at one point tearing up the picture Sylvia intended for him so that Jack won't be hurt by the truth. It's a testament to how much their relationship has changed and how much David values Jack, though the misunderstanding causes a rift between them and Jack refuses to talk to David after he tore up the picture. They are then called to fly a mission where David is shot down, and though he survives, everyone on his side presumes he's dead, including Jack, who is now entirely crestfallen at the loss of his friend because that is what ultimately matters to him, not the rivalry over the girl. Jack is now hellbent on getting revenge for David and is out to kill as many enemy fighters as he can. Meanwhile, David tries to make his way back home and is eventually able to steal an enemy plane to do so. As he is flying back, his plane is spotted by Jack, who thinks he is an enemy fighter and tries to take him down. David, recognizing the symbol on Jack's plane, knows it is his plane and pleads with Jack to stop firing, that it's actually him in the plane. Jack is unable to hear him and, being the experienced pilot that he is, guns David down. David crashes to the ground, and Jack follows the wreckage in order to take a trophy from the plane to represent his latest victory. It is there that he finds that he actually gunned down his best friend. In his dying words, David tells Jack that he doesn't hate him for what he's done, and that the most important thing of all is their friendship, and that he wants a crestfallen Jack to learn how to move on. Before David dies, Jack later discovers the truth behind the torn-up picture, that Sylvia had loved David all along, and that David was only ever trying to protect his feelings. Jack returns home a changed man, torn by the tragedy of war and what he has done. forced to confront David's grieving family and girlfriend. He is finally able to find some semblance of solace through the forgiveness of David's family and through Mary, the girl next door who had neglected this entire time, who is there for him even after all the horrors of war and represents a chance at the future David would want him to have even after all of the tragedy. Wings, despite being a movie with no sound, is quite possibly one of the greatest films ever made. The romance in the film is used to show the immaturity of the main character. He can't realize the important thing he has right in front of him in Mary. He is oblivious to Sylvia's true feelings as well. The immaturity is continually represented throughout the film, even during the war where he won't accept the truth of the relationships, but it is always used to represent his deepening friendship with David and how much David cares for him. It is only after David's passing that Jack is finally confronted with reality and is forced to mature, with his final reunion with Mary representing that final bit of maturity and a last gasp of hope for the future in the midst of a terrible tragedy. The film worked because all of its relationships and dynamics were all very simple and universal and real. They were like the relationships you might see every day, all explored through what something as traumatic as war might do to them. The romance was all a part of that. Once again, romance was an important staple to movies and stories because of how human it is. Hollywood used to know this better than anyone. The problems would only come when it became overused and forced into many films by people who either didn't understand how to do it properly or were forced to do it when it didn't fit their story. But that doesn't mean at its core that romance is a bad thing or that it isn't important for a story. And I've come to realize that I never hated romance in movies. I only hated it when it was done badly. All of the examples I gave at the beginning of the video were of romance being done wrong, but there are actually far more examples of it being done right. How many iconic films are there that we still watch and remember today that were centered on romance in some way? When done right, it can be quite potent, because true, deeper romantic love and care is a good thing. And just because some people are frustrated in real life by romantic relationships and say they've given up doesn't mean it isn't what they might want. And I would caution people on how seriously they take those kind of polls.
Oh, people can come up with statistics to prove anything can't. 40% of all people know that.
Well, despite that being a Simpsons quote, it's true. The Washington Post article I mentioned was someone gathering anecdotal data from their own friend group. Statistics can be manipulated, misleading, and sometimes worded in a way that doesn't tell the whole story, or they can be used just to blow things out of proportion and force a certain idea that maybe far less people even want. I could just as easily give evidence from my knowledge of my own generation and ask, are they really against romance in the Princess Bride sense? Are they against it in the trashy Euphoria sense?
I am crazier!
I could also just use my own knowledge of human beings and say they don't change much. I still see signs everywhere that it's what most people actually want and might even need. When I did my video on Wish and how they eliminated romance from that movie, I was shocked beyond all belief that that video blew up and became my #1 most viewed video at the time of this recording. And why did it do so well? Because the comments section was flooded with girls who said they would have loved the original version of the movie with 2 romantic relationships. Only like 6 people used the "I want romance out of my movies" comment. An anecdotal example? Of course. Just like the polls taken from a certain sample of people that might not show the entire picture. Animated movies have been struggling in general lately, but the one Disney-related movie that managed to pull through just slightly was the one based around romance. It certainly wasn't Wish. Also, in terms of the idea that female leads in movies aimed at women shouldn't have love interests, I've got a little secret to you. I know girls. I have a lot of experience as a girl, and I have a lot of girls that are my friends. And I know that it's a stereotype that girls are really into romance. It's a generalization. Not all girls want that in their media. That said, a ton of girls, if not most, love romance. Sometimes stereotypes do have some truth to them. A lot of the discussion and disappointment I've been seeing from the removal of romance in media has been from girls. I know my girls, I love you guys, and they usually love romance. Not to say that it hasn't also come from men, because men enjoy a good romance too. Or am I reading the upset over the breakup between Spider-Man and Mary Jane wrong? I can see evidence all around that people still want romance in movies and media.
You crave it.
And as a business person myself, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the desire desire there and didn't lean into it. It's kind of a staple of what the Hollywood movie was, and they should know not to steer away from it. We might be seeing a comeback of it now, or perhaps it never completely went away, and I think we can unfortunately always find another bad movie romance rearing its ugly head. But no matter how many badly done movie romances there are, it still doesn't take away from the importance of one done right. As for me, for years I could have done without romance in my movies, but having romance removed so often from films where I expect it to be, realizing what it's like when it's gone, has given me a new appreciation for it. Part of why I enjoyed the movie Godzilla Minus One was not because it had a big huge makeout scene or anything, and it didn't need one, but because the family and romantic angle felt very human to me. We're kind of hardwired to want that, aren't we? Without it, movies just feel a little more empty. Thank you all for watching this long video. Tell me what you think in the comments. Are you mad at me? Leave a comment below. Do you like this video? Leave a comment below. And if you want to help support the channel, well, of course, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more and to help boost this video on the algorithm. And if you really love all my content and want to support me, you can support me on Patreon, and you will get exclusive behind-the-scenes content with that. Thank you, patrons listed to the side. If you want to check out the videos that I've already made that I referenced in this video, then there should be links in the boxes. And I am also a filmmaker myself, so once again, like, comment, and subscribe. Support me on Patreon to support that work, and stay tuned for when my new short film actually gets released. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.
Sorry, milady.